Hey there, it is Rachel, and I know that as a parent right now, you're probably pretty exhausted. You have a lot of demands on your time, you have a lot of demands on your energy, and so you probably don't have a big reserve. So when your kids are being dramatic, it probably really upsets you and you think it's one more thing that is going to exhaust you. So if your kids are fighting, or if your son says anytime you ask him to do something he doesn't want to do, he says, "That's not fair," and he whines and he complains, you probably see this type of drama, again, as another thing that is going to exhaust you. And the natural tendency when we think something's going to exhaust us or wear us out is to try to change the situation or try to make someone else change. So you probably are going to try to make your kids stop fighting. You're probably going to try to get your son to stop saying, "That's not fair," and complaining every time you ask him to do something that he doesn't want to do. The problem with that is trying to control someone else is actually quite exhausting. Now, I do teach strategies for motivating better behavior, moods, and attitudes, but because you can't actually control someone else, it can still be a tiring process. So I have another tip for you. And as I tell you what that tip is to make the drama less exhausting, I want to tell you about what normally happens. So what normally happens is your son might say something like, "That's not fair, I hate going to soccer practice," when you ask him to go to soccer practice and he doesn't feel like going. So you probably get sucked in at that moment. You're thinking, "Oh my gosh, he knows he has to do this every week. Every week it's a complaint," and you get sucked in, and your reaction, because you've gotten sucked in, is probably not very positive. You probably say, "Come on, I'm sick of this complaining." And then your reaction makes the situation worse because your son doesn't like that, and the situation goes downhill. So you getting sucked in is going to make the situation more exhausting. Or maybe you don't get sucked in. Maybe what happens is you know that when you get upset, when your child is upset, that the situation gets worse. So you say to yourself, "Okay, I'm not going to get sucked in. I'm not going to get sucked in." And you're using willpower. Well, I'm going to tell you this, and you probably know this already. Using willpower is exhausting. We have a limited amount of willpower, and using it takes a lot of energy. So if you are either getting sucked in or you're using willpower, you're still exhausting yourself. So I have another tip besides trying to get your kids to change, besides getting sucked in, and besides using willpower. And that tip is to, number one, expect the behavior to happen, and number two, decide how you will handle it. So when I say expect the behavior, I don't mean that you condone the behavior. So if your son says to you, "That's not fair," every time you ask him to do something he doesn't feel like doing, I'm not saying that you should be okay with that. I'm not even saying that you shouldn't work on it at another time. I'm saying in that moment, because it's happened before in the past, expect it. Because what's interesting is that when you expect it to happen, your brain actually gets less triggered. You spend less energy because you're not as upset. So expect it to happen, and once you've expected it, you may as well decide how to handle it. So decide what you're going to do when your son says, "That's not fair." Now, you can be quiet when your son says that. You can say to him, "I'm sorry that it's not fair." You can say, "Okay, well, I'm going to be in the car waiting for you to go to soccer practice." It doesn't matter what you decide to do. The key is that when you already have an action plan in place, it's going to be a lot less exhausting to deal with it. You're not going to have to get sucked in or use willpower. You already know what you are going to do instead. So if you want the drama around you to be less exhausting for you, number one, expect it. Again, doesn't mean we're not going to try to work on things, but in that moment, just expect that it's going to happen. Decide how you're going to handle it, and you will be a lot less exhausted. Chances are the situation will also go better. Ultimately, though, expect it, decide what to do. So if you want to know a little bit more about how to not be exhausted by the drama that's going on around you, I encourage you to listen to my latest podcast episode. You can find that on my website, rachel-bailey.com/205, and I will be back again soon with more tips for you. I'll see you then.